we might have Marla Prowl come in here in the Region 7 office in about a half an hour or so.
Let me see. Yep. I have a link on the homepage, so you're good to go.
We're good to go whenever you are, Chair Kip.
Okay. It's 1 o'clock and it's time to call this meeting to order. I'd like to begin by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Our flag is right up here behind us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So Member Mo is attending today via Zoom. And so I want to welcome everyone. Our first order of business today is approval of the minutes from our October 27th meeting. Does any board member have any questions in regards with those minutes? No questions. So if there are no questions, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll move that the Parks and Recreation Board approve the October 7, 2021 board minutes.
And,
second. I'll second that motion.
And Kathy will second that. Okay. Let's vote on that motion. And today, if we'll have a yay and a nay, and then there's some kind of critical things I'd like to raise our hand to let us. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Member Mo, I didn't see, were you a yay?
Yes.
Okay, I got to remember to look over there. Okay, so that motion passes 5-0. Next on the agenda is the approval of the expenses. Does any member have any questions in regards to expenses? No questions? Then would someone like to make a motion then?
Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry. Excuse me?
Pardon me?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Parks Board, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the financials as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Anyway, a second on that?
I second that.
And Jody seconds that. Thank you. Let's vote on that. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that also passes 5-0. Next on the agenda is the proposed meeting dates. And these dates were just something we were trying to put on the calendar. They're not etched in stone. We're not gonna approve them and put them into our minutes, but we got to try to plan out a little bit ahead of time and put them on calendars. If you have any conflict with the dates that were proposed, you know, we need to know that. A question to the staff is, how far out in advance do you need to know an exact day? I mean, if someone needs to change something, do you need a couple weeks, a month, or?
Mr. Chair and members, for the record, Hope Stockwell, Administrator of the Parks and Outdoor Recreation Division. It depends. Obviously, we can call a meeting with fairly short notice if we were to have an emergency situation for something that needed to be addressed. But for these where we're plotting out far ahead, we typically have, honestly, a 2-month lead time process for getting all the materials together for a board meeting. So as much advance notice as you can give us would be really helpful.
Yes. And the board members, with our jobs and our commitments, I mean, are we fairly flexible? So. Okay. Well, those dates are in your packet there, and we're not going to vote on them or put them in, but we kind of know where we're at there.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, one thing I was maybe just kind of discussion for us to think about is if we look at some of these dates, 2 days, which we haven't had much discussion ourselves about, but we may have opportunity to get together as a group and view some of these different areas. And I mean, I think that would be fantastic, and rather just keep it down instead of just business, you know, we get a better feel for how these projects are going and some things.
Okay. A question, I guess, to Hope. The dates that are on here, you have May 12th and 13th tentative Kalispell. Does that coincide with something that's happening up there for the Fish and Game?
Mr. Chair and members, it coincides with an opportunity we'd like to have occur, which is we'd love to take you to Summers Beach, for instance,
okay,
and do a ribbon cutting of some type, having the donors on hand, having a real public event to celebrate the new addition to the system. That's one example. There are other opportunities ripe up in that area to take you to look at. They might include the expansion of the archery range at Lone Pine State Park or the addition of a new archery range at Big Arm State Park. We're working through those environmental assessments right now for those projects. And so there are numerous opportunities. Might have you take a look at some fishing access sites while we're in the area, even a wildlife management area. It just depends on what we can put together. But that's our intent, Board Member Loomis, is when we have you out there in the regions, having you get on the ground and have those hands-on experiences.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
On the 11th and 12th of August, you suggested Miles City, Glendive. Is there something happening at Makoshka?
Yeah, Mr. Chair and members, Makoshka is an obvious target when you're out in that direction. If you are in Glendive and you don't go to Makoshka, you've done something wrong. But another impetus for being out in that end of the state is the Lower Yellowstone River Corridor Advisory Committee that has just convened or made its final recommendations to the director for new access opportunities on the Lower Yellowstone between Hysham and the North Dakota border. The department's going to be working through those recommendations and determining how to move forward with those. And it's a prime opportunity there to get out on the ground and look at how things are moving forward and some prime spots that could be involved with that work.
Mr. Chair, and Hope, we should try to do something like that October meeting as well.
Agreed, members. We weren't certain workload wise whether we would have an agenda item to bring to you in October. We're sort of using it. I would anticipate we probably will have something. We just couldn't target that one specifically well enough. But that would again be our intention, is to coordinate that. And same with the Helena dates in December. We like to have the meeting in Helena the December before the legislative session, just because it's complicated for staff as we're prepping for session. But having that 8th and 9th date, still an opportunity to go to Spring Meadow or First Peoples up by Great Falls. We have some thoughts in mind in our planning process, improvements and changes at that location. So lots of ripe area opportunities to look at in Helena area too.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, then Next order of business is reports from the board members. Member McLean, can we start with you at that end?
Yes, thank you. Southeastern Montana has been in an incredible drought situation. We did get some moisture toward the end. It made it difficult for a lot of our businesses, for a lot of our adventure travelers and so on, although our numbers were incredibly up, which was wonderful. I think people truly did enjoy coming, but for the locals, it was a concerted effort to make sure they had a good time while we were here and had everything that they needed. We've had a lot of activity and so on, a lot of things going on down there. We have a new trails project. We just opened the Short Pines off-road recreation, got the signs up, thank you. We've got a Yellowstone River Adventures business just opened and so on. Of course, with the river down so low, he's stepped back until we can work things out well and so on. All I'm saying is it has been quite a ride up and down and sideways. We had a lot of new people have moved into our area, and they seem to be a very young, active, let's put it this way. We're not only doing moonlight hikes in Makoshika, we're also doing yoga. Life is good.
Okay, thank you. Member Loomis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have much since the last meeting. I did hear last night that there's a program for children, you know, for to encourage our youth to get engaged in their fishing opportunities, Hooked on Fishing, which a very close relative of mine has been instrumental in that program. And the fourth graders at Rossiter Elementary here in Helena are going to begin that program as well. So I happen to know their teacher. So, and they will probably, I'm not sure, I think they're gonna do some ice fishing, and they'll probably utilize our state parks. Out here, Spring Meadow is an easy place for them to access and that kind of thing. So we'll bust some little kiddies out there and get them on the ice. And so it's good, get people outside, so.
Thank you. Let's move to Member Mo, Vice Chair Mo.
Thank you. The thing that has kept me busy a little bit since our last meeting is, again, the Smith River project. We met with, we had meetings on December, I'm going to get the date wrong, but two different meetings in the last couple of weeks, the first of which I was able to attend. And the staff presented the proposals and entertained questions. There were, Cayenne will be able to tell you the precise number. I was just looking it up as we were going on. It seems to me nearly 35 members of the public attended one of those meetings. And it wasn't to hear public comment, but just to make sure that people had been told the parameters of the discussion. We are right now trying to set up a meeting for that advisory group for January, and looks like it's going to be January 19th or 20th. So that's an important project, and I'm excited about it.
Okay, thank you.
I also sat in on that December 1st Smith River meeting, and it was sure a good meeting. I thought, we got to cover all of the proposed changes to the Smith, and there was some good input. So that was a good meeting, I thought.
Okay. Thank you. My report, there's an interesting thing happening at Lewis and Clark Caverns next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I believe. And then right before Christmas, they do a tour through part of the caverns with lanterns. And you can sign up, and a small nominal fee, you're able to attend that. my wife and I have signed up for it. We think that'd be quite neat to go through there with candles. Bannock on January 9th is, they have an event up there, and it's the day that they hung Sheriff Henry Plummer. So, and it's also a fundraiser for the Bannock Association. They have a dinner on that day too. And so those are the two things with the parks that are happening in our area. The other thing I'd like to speak about was the failure at Hebkin Lake for water releases. That could have been catastrophic. And the way the Fish and Game moved on it and the way they were able to get the general public out there as well as their staff to help mitigate the problem, get those small fish back into running water, not pools where they would either die or get eaten. You know, you won't know for years. You may never know how much damage was done, but it wasn't, it's not going to be as much as it could have been. And the river was not drawn completely down, which makes a big difference. It was drawn down quickly, but coming from the Beaver Head where Clark Canyon Dam controls the flows, in the wintertime, when they're trying to build water up in the dam, they'll have releases down to as skinny as 50 CFS, occasionally down to 35. And those big fish make it. They take their time getting to that. That's a little different than what happened at Hebkin and the Madison, but it's not a death sentence when something like that happens. And everybody moved fast on it. They were able to get it fixed, and they were fishing it again in 3 or 4 days after the tragedy. So that was all good. So that's all I have to report from our area. Okay, next order of business is the director's report. And it looks like Quentin Kujala is here sitting in for Director Warsack.
Thank you, Chair Kip and other board members. Yeah, Quentin Kujala here reporting on behalf of Director Warsack. He apologizes. He's unable to attend today. He wanted to first extend a thank you again for all of your efforts preparing and then engaging the topics on the agenda today as a next step in the Parks Board process. Thank you also for the conversation about calendar dates and the idea of 2 days. And yeah, that sounds like a really rich opportunity. And whether it be something very formal or very detailed, planned in great detailed fashion as an evening, or just public listening session, it's been the agency's experience that when the decision makers go out to those communities, other than Helena, they're well received, and people see that as a great opportunity to engage in a way that they don't often get to do. So kudos to the board for looking forward with that with enthusiasm. I also want to connect with some board comments given the weather to date. I appreciate the hot tip on ice fishing. I've been waiting for one, so thank you for that. And then would restate your observations of collaboration across public, agency, industry on the Madison circumstance. And I think you've captured that well, Chair Kip. Could have been a lot worse, but folks in first recognizing it and assessing and mobilizing in one way or another, it's that came back to where everybody expected to be in pretty short order. So I think you've captured that really well. Again, the director apologizes for not being here. Thank you for your service. And that also, as Hope gets ready to go to the podium to address the agenda topics, I know director also wants to give a nod of recognition in front of the board to Hope and her staff and other department staff as they continue every day to put more definition on the new division. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is the Flocow appeals request. Hope, would you fill us in there?
Mr. Chair and members, again, for the record, Hope Stockwell, Administrator of the Parks and Outdoor Recreation Division. Before you today is an appeal of 2 parking tickets that were issued to Mr. And I apologize, sir, we didn't get a chance to talk before the meeting. Is it Klokow or Klokow? The proper pronunciation? Oh, this isn't the gentleman even. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought he was joining us today. I apologize. I thought he was joining us. I'll go with Mr. Klokow for now. Appeal of 2 parking citations there at Lake Mary Ronan. We have provided both information from the gentleman and then also our park staff, Brian Schwartz. And the way that an appeal like this works, we also have Zach Zipfel who's with us. The appeal process is not something that's been used much at all. So it's a little new to us, but your opportunity today as you consider the information in front of you is to really 3 options. Either uphold the appeal in whole or in part, deny the appeal in whole or in part, or return the decision back to the director for more consideration. And so those are your 3 options here. You are not required to ask questions of or receive comment from anyone on the matter. It's entirely in your hands. If you'd like to do that, you're welcome to. I would say that if you do ask a question of anybody specifically, that we should offer the opportunity to both the agency and the gentleman. And you have the information in front of you that was provided in the packet that was also provided both to the staff and Mr. Klokow, so everyone has the same materials in front of them. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll stand aside. Mr. Zipfel, do you have any other further considerations or instructions you'd like to give to the board members as they deliberate today?
I do not, Hope. I think you covered it all nicely. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I guess we need to discuss this. You all received the packet. It was quite detailed. The first part talks about the appeals and then the parking according to the rules. Next was a letter from Ed Klokow and to the State Parks Board. Then the Fish and Game responded to him. A couple letters there, and then another letter back to appeal the ticket. There are some timelines that have to be met in there, and from the time that he receives, Mr. Klokow receives the appeal. Not sure if it's just that I need some help here. How am I?
That's okay, sir. I believe you're referring to there was a 10-day time frame.
Yes.
From which the director sent a letter. When the letter was received by Mr. Klokow, what his 10-day time frame was to respond and say that he wanted to appeal to the board formally. Right. And it's staff's belief and understanding that he did meet that 10-day requirement.
Met that criteria. Okay. And then there's a picture there that his depiction of it. And then Brian Schwartz, who is the park manager for Lone Pine, weighs in, and he's got his information back to the director and give timelines and such, and where things were. There were pictures of the truck, the trailer, where it was parked, the equipment that was on site at that time. They were doing some maintenance work there. They had a small loader in there, pile of gravel, and then the parking area that the truck was parked in front of, the single parking area that blocked that off. And then the last, and I need some clarification from Mr. Schwartz on that. The last picture is the auxiliary parking lot when the parking next to the lake itself is full? Brian, could you?
So no, yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so the auxiliary parking, they drove right by it on the way in. That was not full. There was, when I arrived, there was one truck and trailer combination in there. But no, that wasn't full.
No, but the sign that says no overnight boat trailer parking, is that the auxiliary parking lot?
Yes.
And when you arrived that day, there were a few trucks and trailer in that?
There was one other truck and trailer that I remember in there. Yeah, down by the boat launch, all the designated parking spots were full, but the overflow parking lot, which you said is the auxiliary parking lot, that was not full. That had one other truck and trailer.
Okay. So I've looked at this, and each one of you have. I guess we need to hear from each member what they're thinking. What if we need any more information? Do we need to ask anyone something? So,
Mr. Chairman, sorry, I haven't been to this boat launch personally, but from looking at the photos and the drawings, and it looks like that the agency FWP has done a really good job of trying to accommodate as many people in this area as they can. I look like you're trying to organize a nice parking area and get as many people in there efficiently, whether you've got just a car or you've got a truck and a trailer. It looked like to me, like they did a really good job. I've been to some really, really lousy boat launches before. I've been places where I don't want to launch my boat. And this is a very nice facility from what I could tell. It looks like it's very well organized. All of the lines showed, your parking lines are laid out very clearly. It looks like the signage lays out what's expected of the users. I can understand what it's like to show up at a place and you're a little late and the bite's about off and you're trying to get out and get on the water. But it looks like the agency has done a very good job and obviously spent a lot of resources on this facility to try to accommodate as many people as they can. And if I was in Mr. Schwartz's position, I probably would have behaved the same way. I probably would have taken the same action. So okay. I'd be willing to hear from the others what your thoughts are.
Mr. Chairman, my thoughts always goes to safety of anybody else there and so on. And I know that there was a question Mr. Schwartz was looking at in case the construction was blocked and those people coming. So, that might or might not have been a valid, but at least it was taken under consideration. I thought that was well met.
Okay. Do I need to turn this on, Colleen?
No, it's live.
Okay, good. Great. So it seems to me this is a little overblown it was not a real busy time there. And with the construction going on, I could see that it might be confusing as to where to park. So I guess I'm feeling like it's a bit overblown personally.
Okay. Any other comment? Yes, I'm sorry. Vice Chair Moe, your thoughts?
I too am sort of surprised that we're going through such a formal process over what seems to me to be a relatively minor matter. And one of the things that is helpful to my thinking is on what basis do we make this decision? Because I do not want to substitute my judgment for the professional that we hire to exercise that judgment and who has far more experience with it and was on the ground literally, whereas we're simply looking at pictures. And I kind of liken it to how referees deal with a call that is made on the field. Are we looking for clear evidence that Mr. Schwartz made a mistake in giving one of those citations? Because I don't see that evidence. And if that were the case, I would be interested to hear if there is evidence that he did make a mistake. That, for instance, Member Brown has brought up that it appears that the area may not have been clear that that was a single parking because of the construction going on. But not knowing that, I don't want this board to get into the position at every meeting of relitigating every ticket that's ever given. So Zach, if you could tell me, are we substituting our judgment for the judgment that is already made? Or are we finding that there is evidence that that judgment was in error?
Chairman Kipp, members of the board, to answer your question, the legal standard is whether, and you'll have to bear with me because I'm going to read from the statute for you here. Whether the decision of the agency, in this case, the decision to issue the ticket, was clearly erroneous in view of essentially what the evidence, which is what you would see in the administrative record that was provided to you, or whether there was the agency's decision was arbitrary or capricious. That's the standard under the Montana Administrative Procedures Act. There are a couple of others that I don't think are probably applicable here. Violation of constitutional or statutory provision. I don't believe there's any allegation that it was. In excess of the statutory authority of the agency, I don't think there's any allegation here that it was. And the third option would be that it would be, the fifth, that it was made upon unlawful procedure, which again, I don't think that there's any allegation that it was. So I think that when we're looking at the standards set forth under MAPA, the two places where you would be essentially your standard of review, if you will, are whether it was clearly erroneous in light of the evidence that you have before you, or whether the agency, the conduct was arbitrary or capricious. Does that answer your question?
It does. I suppose an argument could be made that in light of the construction going on there, that it was arbitrary in that, but I can see in the photographs the single parking lines. So I'm just having trouble finding the evidence that would allow us to make the decision that we should overturn the decision of the officer.
Is that all, Member Mo?
Pardon me?
Is that all you have?
It is.
Okay, any other discussion? Would any of the board members like to make a motion on this? So I didn't look at you again, Vice Chair Mo. Did you want to make a motion here?
Do we need to make a motion if we do not intend to grant the appeal?
Back to Zach again, please.
Chairman Kidd, members of the, I think a motion would be appropriate to indicate the board's official decision.
So we have the option of upholding Mr. Klokow's appeal, denying Mr. Klokow's appeal, or returning the decision to the director for further clarification or consideration. those would be the three avenues we have. So again, does any board member want to make a motion?
I can make a motion.
Thank you.
I would move that we deny the appeal.
Okay. I need a second on that.
Mr. Chairman, I will second.
Okay,
that we deny them.
So we have a motion to deny the appeal from Vice Chair Moe, and we have a second from Ms. McLean. So
I would just say, Mr. Chairman, is that specific enough language in that motion? Is it okay?
Yeah, I would say yes. So
and I can speak to the motion. I do not find any evidence that Mr. Schwartz acted capriciously or arbitrarily. And I don't find any evidence that the citations that he made a mistake in finding that he had violated those parking rules.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, then let's vote on that motion. All in favor of the motion to deny the appeal, say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
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 So, and then anyone opposed? Okay, so the motion passes 5-0 that Mr. Kluckhow's appeal has been denied by the Parks Board. Okay, the next item is Montana State Parks Biennial Smith River Rules, a 1-year extension. And then Hope will do a presentation here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. Again, Hope Stockwell, Division Administrator. So the Smith River Biennial rule sets the fees and the use rules for the Smith River and the corridor there. And that's something that the board specifically is authorized to handle in statute. We came to you last year knowing that we were undertaking an update to the 2009 Smith River Management Plan and asked you to extend the rule for a year as we worked through that process, knowing that there could be some rule changes proposed that come out of that planning process. As we are right now, we're in the process of wrapping up the planning process. We're not quite done yet. We also may have some considerations that we need to give more time to as to where we head with perhaps rule changes. And so we're asking if you would please extend the rule for 1 more year to the end of December next year. In addition to helping us with the Smith River planning process, we are undertaking department-wide, and I believe I mentioned this in October, a holistic review of all of our use rules and fees at all of our sites. And so we would like to do that in conjunction with this and come back to you after that is all done. It fits right into the governor's initiative to look at red tape reduction and review rules holistically. And so if you would give us the space to do that and extend that, we would be grateful. We are also in the process of when the departmental use rules come forward. I believe February is when those deadlines are. We'll be going through and also asking the commission to extend their set of rules as well for another year to give the same sort of runway to this holistic look. So that's the context here, board members, and thank you.
Okay, does the board have any questions for Hope regarding her presentation? I have one question. So this would be an extension for 1 year to the end of 2022. When do people have to start applying for Smith River use permits?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, members. So that's typically the lottery is in February, I think, when that application, or we open it sooner and the lottery is in February. I'm sorry, I'm blanking.
So that would give us time to move from, if this was approved, into the new year for applying and
Right. And Mr. Chair, honestly, I'm not sure that coming out of the management plan update that we're working on, that we would be looking at any lottery changes for the 23 season would be the soonest that anything would occur. It's more likely that what would come in front of you would be perhaps a waste pack out rule would be most likely. I think that the way that we have described the preferred alternative in the environmental assessment is that we would be looking to use an adaptive management approach and start with some other potential changes. There could be some incentives that we might like to include in the lottery in 23 to help incentivize smaller groups. So there's still some decisions to be made there, but anything pertaining to that would be done for the 23 season.
Okay, thank you.
So I sat in on the Smith River meeting and talking about camping there. So that camping would be allowed next year and maybe not in 2023.
As I understand it, board member, the way that the Eden Bridge Camp, I'm sorry, not Eden Bridge, Camp Baker camping,
Camp Baker, right.
Camp Baker would be closed still for the 22 season if the EA and decision notice is adopted under the preferred alternative.
And packing out your waste also in 2022?
I believe the expectation, Mr. Brown, is that we would look at an educational cycle in 2022 with the hard enforcement of a pack out system for 23.
Yeah, it was pointed out at that meeting that the Smith River may be the last river that doesn't have packing out your own waste. And I've done the Colorado and the Green and all these other rivers where it's part of the game and it's not a big deal. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, there are no more questions for Fish and Game. Would someone like to make a motion then?
I will. I move that the Parks and Recreation Board adopt a one-year extension of the current Montana State Parks Biennial Smith River rule as proposed.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Okay. Member Mo, second that. Thanks for the motion. We'll take time to take public comment on that motion. If there's anyone in Helena who would like to comment, please come forward. We've got a few people in here, but not to comment on that. Next, we'll take any public comment via Zoom. And Bennett is...
There's no one with their hand raised currently.
Do we need to give them a little bit of time or just move on? Okay, we'll move on. So no public comment there. Any more board discussion? We're good. Since there's no questions, all in favor of extending this for one more year, say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that motion passes 5-0. Okay, the next thing is the assignment of the Hell Creek State Park to the Little Shell Tribe. And I believe Hope will present again here.
Mr. Chairman, members, this is a big, exciting day. Of course, depending on how the decision goes, but not to sound pre-decisional here, but I'm really hopeful. Again, for the record, Hope Stockwell, Division Administrator, and this decision here comes from a year plus of discussions about transitioning administration and management of the Hell Creek Recreation Site from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks to the Little Shell Tribe. In August, the two entities signed a memorandum of understanding regarding the transition of the responsibilities. And today is the really big step, the significant change that causes the domino in the next steps for the full transition to occur. And that is your approval of the assignment of our existing lease, FWP, with the Army Corps of Engineers for operation of the site, assigning the remainder of that lease to the Little Shell tribe. And so under that, once it's fully implemented, they will be responsible for day in and day out management and maintenance of the site. We've been working on making that a good, smooth transition with them. In October, Little Shell staff and Chairman Gray visited the site with our staff and walked alongside together in winterizing it. We've put together a winterization document for them, and then we plan to do the same thing in reverse in the spring as we bring the site back on, walking alongside them as we open up the facilities again. And so while this decision today, if approved, sets off this domino chain of events, FWP still has a presence at the site through about mid-March will be when there are some staff housing units there that staff would relocate at that time. And so there's a period of time over which things are changing. But this decision today really comes with the biggest change of the Little Shell can move forward with establishing a reservation system for next year's season. They've already been doing a great good faith effort for folks. We let the public know in a press release that the reservation system would not open in November as it typically did under our administration. And the Little Shell have been taking phone reservations and reserving dates for folks so that when the formal system is up and running, they're ready to go. They are working through those final details with the Corps. The Corps is signing off on their operational plan. And so once that's signed off on, they'll have the reservation system up and running fully. But we do appreciate that they've been doing such great customer service in the meantime. The other primary piece is that with this assignment, they also assume then in a secondary piece of paper that will happen on the department side of things, it's not for the board's decision, you don't need to authorize it, is the assignment of our agreement with the concessionaire, Hell Creek Marina. So once your authorization comes today for assignment of the lease, that's the next step, and so on and so forth. I will say that this document in your packet for the assignment of the lease was really anticlimactic for me when Zach sent it over as we prepared for the meeting. It's really one paragraph with a couple of signature lines and dates. And I said, really? That's it? Because it belies the amount of work and effort and conversation that has gone into this process. And I just want to give a big thank you to the Little Shell for making it so easy, and to our staff who have worked so diligently in helping accomplish this. It's been a wonderful partnership in that regard. And so, Mr. Chair, I think I'll leave it at that. If you have any particular questions, I guess two things I will still point out, as it mentions in the cover sheet, that the Corps of Engineers requires FWP to remain obligated during the lease assignment for liability of the site. And we're totally comfortable with that and think it's appropriate. That's not a problem on our side of things. And then also another key piece of this transition process is that we will be working with the Fish and Wildlife Service to make sure that they're comfortable with the relationship in terms of the Army Corps of Engineers guaranteeing that the site will continue to remain a public recreation site because of the improvements that have been made there with federal money that come with strings. The site needs to continue to operate as that public recreation site through the useful life of those improvements. And so we'll be laying that out with the Corps of Engineers in a letter of agreement. That may not be quite the right term, but that's how I think of it. And then, so the Corps assumes that responsibility and also then will require that of any future lessees. That's just a document that needs to be finalized, but is fully expected to come to fruition. And then the Fish and Wildlife Service would sign off on that. I'll stand aside for any comment and questions.
Okay, anybody have questions? I do for Stockwell. You said that the fishing game would have a presence there until in March. Were there some projects that we needed to finish up? Was there this has been a lot of information over these meetings. Was there a low water ramp or a septic that we still are obligated to finish?
Mr. Chair and members, the septic is resolved. The issues that have come up with that in recent months have been a high use of the fish cleaning station and the water being routinely run and cycled through too much. So there's been an educational effort with the public that when you're doing your fish cleaning, don't run the system every fish, run it with a batch of fish. That was part of it. We did recently have to replace the grinder though in the fish cleaning station. We've done that. And Brian Berkey and the regional staff and Hell Creek staff have been working very hard to turn over the park in good condition to the tribe. That's our full expectation, is that the things that should be taken care of are taken care of. We had a well casing crack that was discovered. And so we've rectified that as well and repaired that in process. The other pieces that are coming, so you mentioned the low water boat ramp, and we have the agency, FWP, has gone through the process of obtaining the necessary 404 permit from the Corps to do the work to lay more gravel to support the low water boat ramp. The water is very low right now, and that boat ramp is revealed. We have talked with the Little Shell, and if Chairman Gray wants to speak to this during his comments, I would welcome that. We've talked with them about what's the appropriate timing of doing that gravel work, whether it was under us or before the assignment of the lease or after. The Corps' advice was to do it after in the spring because of the predictions forecast for water levels is to be much lower even than it is now, depending on what happens with snowpack. Right. And so we're staying in conversation with the Little Shell so that we can see where the water level is in the spring and determine what's the best course of action at that time. But we have achieved the permit that we need to do the work, and we're just going to stay in partnership as we figure out the best course of action once we know where the water level is, because there's a real opportunity or chance, I guess is the better word, that there's a second lower water boat ramp that will be revealed over the course of this winter that will need addressing in the spring, clearing sediment off of it, making sure it's fully functionable and accessible. And so it makes most sense to get the equipment in there once and do it all at the same time, rather than doing something now in advance of the lease assignment, just waiting till the spring. And we'll have to work through those details together, but the department is very comfortable doing that with the tribe. And in my conversations with the chairman, I think he's in the same place, but I can let him speak to that. The other piece of capital improvement that's there is something that's not either of our obligations, the agency or the tribe, but the concessionaire is doing some improvements to a retaining wall behind their fuel tank. And we are required by the Corps to sign off on the plan for that. And so we have a structural engineer reviewing that. That's expected to be completed and back to us next week. But the Little Shell have been the primary contact for the concessionaire already and helping them work through those technical specs and getting the documents to the Corps that the Corps required. And we've really appreciated that.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion?
Just Mr. Chair, just a comment.
Okay.
If this is an appropriate time, I would, it was the first meeting of this board as it is now, was kind of a contentious, I would say, if that's, and some public comment that that we took at that time when we looked at a year extension on the lease with the option for another year, and there was quite a few folks some of the folks in the that commented on this thought that that the parks were going to be here involved in this for forever, and I think that this shows that the parks, that FWP and especially the Parks Department has worked real hard to make this happen. We're not looking at another year extension, and I think that that's just shows that. I think that's going to go help to build public trust quite a bit back on this issue for those that thought we weren't going to, that this wasn't going to happen. So I think it's wonderful. And to everybody that worked on this, great job. So.
So the action that we took at that first meeting, I believe, was a 2-year lease with 2 single years addition. So it could have been up to 4 years, and you basically got it done in 1 year. Okay.
And my only comment is I do appreciate hearing that if anything is left that you're remediating or addressing or going to have conversation with anything, issues that may come up, which is wonderful, rather than just saying, okay, it's yours, you go for it. You know, I think you've done very good job there.
Okay, if we don't have any other questions or comments, would someone like to make a motion there?
Mr. Chair, I think we need to take public comment.
Before the motion?
Oh, that's a good question. Sorry.
We need the motion first.
I'm having a brain blank.
I'm sorry. Motion first, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, would someone like to make that motion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I move that the Parks and Recreation Board approve assignment of the remainder of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks lease with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for operation of Hell Creek State Park to the Little Shell Tribe.
They would someone
Mr.
else?
Chair, I would second that.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Now we'll take public comment on this. We'll start with comment on Zoom. And I believe that's Bennett that will release those.
Mr. Chair, currently there's no one's hand raised in Zoom for public comment.
Mr. Chair, if I might be so bold, I would like to allow a specific opportunity for Chairman Gray and make sure that he's recognized if he's available.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you all. I didn't know if I was supposed to raise my hand or wait for any question. So, but I just want to say I'd really like to give a big shout out to the director, all of his staff, and the Parks Board for definitely working very hard on this transition and making it as smooth as possible for the Little Shell Tribe. Just to let everybody know, we are going to operate this park in the spirit of the intention of what it was supposed to be, public access for the state of Montana and non-residents of Montana to access the wonderful lake Fort Peck on the south shore, as it's the only access along that side of the lake. Again, I'd really like to specifically give a shout out to the director. Hope has been a big help, Zach, and also Quinn Kuka. And with that, we really do appreciate it. It has been nothing but a pleasure working with everybody there. And we do appreciate this opportunity. I would turn on my camera, but I'm sitting in my car in Butte.
Gotcha. So is there any other comments through Zoom? All right. Then we'll take public comment from anybody that's here today. Okay. Seeing none, does the board have any further questions before voting on the motion? Nope. Okay, since we don't have any questions, all in favor of the motion, say aye, raise your hand. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Okay, that motion passes 5-0. And I think this is a good day.
Mr. Chair, if I might just say one more thing, I wanted to specifically thank the regional and Hell Creek staff by name, if you're comfortable with that.
Please.
Brian Berkey is the regional park manager and has been doing a wonderful job of leading the crew out there through this. Also, Tom Schausch, Joe Veroy, and Eric Dion, as well as Andrew Mariotti and Jamie Hould. They have done a wonderful job in challenging times and have really helped us get this ball over the finish line. We still have a few steps to go, but they're doing yeoman's work, not the least of which will be removing a big concrete tank that the Corps is requiring us to extract before we are out of there fully. And no one wants the tank. They don't want to buy it from us. They don't want to move it. And so these guys are literally going out with sledges and destroying this thing and carrying it out by truck in the next couple of weeks. And so they are working hard to ensure this all happens as it's supposed to. And we are deeply grateful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next part of our agenda is just informational items.
Do we have that summer speech?
No. No. And the next part is informational items. The Missouri Headwater State Park Master Plan update from the contractor. So that's Mr. Fadness. So please state your name, where you're from, and who you represent.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Board Member. Jeremy Fadness, WWC Engineering. I'm here in Helena, Montana. We were hired by FWP spring of 2021 to prepare a master plan for Headwaters State Park. And today I'm just going to give you a brief summary update on where we're at with the master planning process. Right now, we're kind of at the end of the process, but we wanted to come give you a update. So quick summary on the project. If this works. Where do I point it? There it goes. All right. Quick project summary, just to update everybody on where, what we're doing. The goals of the project are to document and summarize the history of the park, prepare an inventory of the park, conduct a public outreach, and to identify needs, prepare a needs assessment based on the inventory and the outreach, and then finally prepare goals, objectives for the park, and develop a prioritized action plan for the park for the future. The project schedule. So this is the project schedule. Right now we are about a month behind, just due to some medical things, COVID, all that good stuff. So, but we're getting there. We were hoping by this time this year we were going to have a draft plan ready to go and out for public comment. We're a few weeks out from that right now. We've completed the prioritization of projects, which you've been provided that information at the end of your packet. And now we're proceeding to put together all of these pieces that we've developed over the last 8 months, 7-8 months. So we hope to have a draft report out within the next couple of weeks before Christmas, so that we can get that out for public comment, and then hopefully get it finished up by the end of January. So in August, we started a community survey process, working with the advisory team. WWC prepared a community survey. We put that out online, and we provided hard copies on site at the park. Park staff handed out, I think they handed out roughly, I would say 300 or 400 postcards to visitors with the address for people to go fill out the survey. Probably 100 hard copy surveys. And we also had some flyers that they put up around Three Forks and Bozeman. Park staff did an excellent job really getting out there in the public and trying to promote this community survey and involvement in this project. They had some radio spots in Bozeman. I believe they even interviewed on the news one time as well. So Park staff, I kudos to Park staff and FWP staff for really stepping up and trying to go in the extra mile to get the community, try to get the community involved with the process. Press release was also sent out with a link to the survey, as well as posted on the project website that was developed by WWC Engineering. We actually were scheduled to complete the survey in mid-September. We didn't have as many responses as we would have liked, so we actually extended that to the end of September. At this time, or by the end of September, we had received 29 responses to the survey, and we've provided a summary of the survey results with your packet. We also held a community meeting in Three Forks on September 2nd, in which about a dozen people from Three Forks attended. We gave them a brief summary of the project, and then we provided stations with maps, with whiteboards, where they could go around and write down things they wanted to see, places they liked in the park. They actually provide on maps, drew on the maps where they spend the most time when they're at the park, those sorts of things. So that is also was helpful in us developing the needs for the park as well. So, once we got done with the community survey process and the first public meeting, we proceeded to prepare the needs assessment for the park that basically outlined all the projects that the advisory team and FWP staff, as well as projects that were developed or talked about in the community survey and kind of rose to the top based on feedback. That assessment was broken down into 7 project goals. These will be outlined in the goals and objectives portion of the report, but that was cultural and heritage, environmental and natural resources, recreation, economics, social, safety, and operation and maintenance. Once we developed that needs assessment at about mid-November, we put out a matrix, we put together a matrix of projects so that the project could be prioritized. That matrix is provided at the end of your packet. We sent that prioritization out to the advisory team, FWP staff, as well as the public, the people that participated in the survey, that provided their email address and contact information and wanted to continue providing feedback on the projects. We sent that matrix out to them as well. It was also sent out to tribal members as well to try to get feedback. That prioritized list is provided at the very end of your packet. I just finished developing that yesterday. Last week was the deadline for getting back those matrices. We got 13 responses to the matrix as of last week. Finally, I just want to hit upon the format for the report of what we're looking at, how to organize the report. There's a lot of data. We spent 2 months collecting information and developing maps. We got all the community survey results. We have the needs assessment. We have a lot of feedback from the advisory team, from FWP staff, and from the public. And so we really focused on how do we organize this document so that it's user friendly, because we don't want to put together a 200-page report that everybody has to just dive through and try to pick out what they want to see. So we're going to organize the report into 4 distinct sections. It's going to be the introduction, and then we're going to have a section 2 will be focused on the past, and that will outline the history of the park and how we got to where we are today. 3rd section will be the present. That will talk about the current status of the park, inventory, provide a community profile, and then outline or summarize the public involvement process. And then finally, the future. That's where we will talk about the park vision, goals and objectives, needs assessment, and then the prioritization of projects. That's all I have for an update, and I'm available for questions. I don't know if Hope wanted to add.
So, excuse me, sir, this isn't a question per se, but it's just a comment. I really like seeing in your needs prioritization cause and effect and impact. I think that's very interesting way you explain.
Yeah, there'll be a lot more information in the report itself. We're trying to keep everything kind of summarized today, because if I went into everything we've done to date, we'd be here for 2 hours.
Nothing.
So I'm trying to summarize everything. So in the report, when you see the report, there's going to be a lot more information. So
that's good.
Anybody else? Nope, I guess that's it. And thank you.
So, I didn't catch your name.
Jeremy Fadness with WWC Engineering.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yes. Thanks for the opportunity to summarize this for you.
Member Mo, did you have anything? I keep forgetting that you're over there today.
I keep forgetting that too. No, I'm excited to see the plans move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on my agenda is Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Reorganization and Planning Update. And Hope will give that presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Again, Hope Stockwell, Division Administrator. And I'll just say, coming off of Jeremy's presentation, I do want to extend my big thanks for your work. He and his staff have really been accommodating as we asked to extend those public input timelines so that we could try and get as many pieces of community survey input and the matrix input as possible. And we really appreciate how accommodating they've been. So thank you very much. And I am impressed that you kept it to 10 minutes. Nice work, because you could talk for a few hours on the ground you have covered. I think the other thing that I would add, so at the last advisory team meeting that we had in regard to the Headwaters project, we talked a lot about, and if you look at the needs prioritization, which we just received yesterday, but the identification and protection of cultural assets is number 4 on this list. And you look further down, preserve historic building and location, interpretive education center, visitor center, ethnography work. These really tie into the cultural importance of the site and the history. And it's such an important history at that confluence there in Montana. And what our plan is, we were discussing in the advisory team meeting of being sure to proactively engage the tribes in this work and as we move forward on the site, because it's such an important site to them. And we've sort of dreamed up a field day, hopefully in early April-ish when the weather's starting to turn, to invite the tribes to come and walk the landscape with us and talk in a good way about the importance of sites to them as we think about where new infrastructure might be located. Where should we not put it based on the importance of the land to you and how you've used it and continue to use it? And so being sure to incorporate those perspectives as we think really conscientiously about how we move this forward, because we really do want it to be a joint reflection of that site and its history here in Montana at all levels, pre-contact and post-contact. And so just an example of the intention that we have as we move forward and look through the master plan and the phased approach, et cetera. We're going to be thinking hard and very carefully about the approaches. And it may also rely on different types of funding sources that we find, and there will be a lot of calculations in how the phased approach occurs. But just want to let you know that those conversations are going on right now. And many thanks to Quinn Kuka, our tribal liaison, who's been working with the tribes, and Martha Small, a member of the Northern Cheyenne, who has served on the advisory team to help guide us. And so we just want to be sure we're going forward in the best way possible in that regard. Switching gears here. So I'm going to give you sort of a soup to nuts update on the division and work that's happening within the park system. But I'll start with the reorganization. We continue. We are moving hard as fast as we can toward having all of the regional staffing framework changes in place for the March timeframe when we're really getting back out on the landscape and opening up infrastructure. And there's a lot of work and conversation to go on in those parts. We've had a cross-divisional work group meeting every Thursday for, a couple of months now, I guess it is, a bigger group, a smaller group, a middle-sized group, kind of chewing on these pieces of what that staffing structure looks like at the regional level between site operations, the traditional park rangers and those folks at park sites, for instance, down to maintenance. And, some of those duties have been combined in the past and we're separating them out for different reasons, efficiency, but also to use the new proprietary account to better fund and build maintenance positions. So there are a lot of considerations in that, and we're really getting to the hard work of looking at, okay, this staff position has been primarily doing this site ops, or primarily doing this maintenance, or primarily doing this something else, and working through and carefully considering those things. And so that's going to be some hard lift over the next couple of months, sorting through that. But I really appreciate the staff that have been involved with that and have shared so freely their thoughts, both concerns and excitement, depending on the perspective and the particular issue. And they've invested a lot of time and help in helping us go forward in a good way. We are working on establishing the bureau chief positions. We'll have 3 bureaus: visitor services, the stewardship bureau, which is maintenance, capital projects, heritage and cultural resource protection. We're also going to have an access and landowner relations bureau. The stewardship bureau chief is the first position to go out, and that has been on our website and posted with the state for a couple of weeks now. It closes Sunday night. So I'm excited to see what the response has been. I truly don't know. And that position is our first big step forward in putting the new infrastructure in place and the staffing framework. We have one additional program that's come into the division since our last meeting. So again, as a reminder, it's visitor services for parks, fishing access sites, recreation management on wildlife management areas. It's also maintenance of all of those things, plus administrative facilities. It's all access programs, hunting, fishing, other types of recreation, including block management as a flagship program many people are familiar with. So there's a lot of moving parts. The trail programs, the trail grant programs, we're hoping to increase our emphasis on trails planning over the course of our work and building that out, improving our planning components and really enhancing those. So a lot of work to be done. The new piece that's coming in is twofold related to shooting ranges. We had some new appropriation out of the last legislative cycle and federal legislation for shooting range development. And so we have an appropriation that will be incorporating that into our stewardship bureau in terms of the capital projects that we are focusing on with that bureau and the maintenance work operate. So that's coming in there. The other piece is the community shooting range grant program will be coming into our access and landowner relations bureau. Much like those trail grant programs that we have now, we'll be operating the shooting range grant program out of there. And so just to let you know, that's an update. We're all types of recreation in this division. It's a broad base, and that's the director's intent, is getting those people pieces under one umbrella for a cohesive, holistic effort at managing them. Any questions on that before I move forward with anything else? Okay.
No questions.
Okay. So transitioning into other planning pieces. So you've heard about Headwaters this morning, a little bit on Smith, but let me give you a bigger update on what's going on with the Smith. We had our second public information session on Wednesday night, and you heard Vice Chair Moe mention that, and thanks to her for her participation. And we also had Jane Kallmeyer and Carol Hatfield from the advisory committee participate in those and listen in. But we, I think, have really had a strong public engagement on this. We've had more than 60 comments come in already. We still have about a week to go. We put out another press release this week, reminding folks of the deadline next week, but it's been robust. And good, thoughtful feedback, which is always helpful. You know, people are really chewing this over and thinking about it and providing constructive comments, and that is the best thing for us. We had about 22 people at that first meeting and 10 attending the second meeting. We had 2 public meetings, the last 2 Wednesday nights. And I really want to thank staff for the hard work they put into that. There were light questions. Those meetings were not intended for taking formal comment. They really were informational sessions, and then we instructed the public on how to get their comments formally submitted. But light questions, so we would like to think, and we hope that that's because we've done a good job in putting the information out for folks to consider in the draft environmental assessment and the presentations that were made in those meetings. And I want to recognize the hard work staff put in. It was really, really strong work, both at headquarters with Cayenne Bishop and Charlie Sperry leading sort of the planning cap on it, Linnea Schroer out of Bozeman helping with the MIPA work, and then in the region, Colin Moss, John Taylor, Gary Bertolotti, and Nate Klutz, others there involved with the Smith have done a lot of work to get that EA shaped up the way that it was. But we'll be preparing a summary of those public comments and the draft decision notice. Once that's wrapped up, we'll present it to the department leadership and then also the public advisory group, and get some feedback from the public advisory group probably mid-January, as we prep for our final decision notice that will come out later in January or early February is what we expect. So that's kind of the timeline we're on here. And we fully expect the decision notice to identify some management directions that might require rule review, which we talked a little bit about earlier today. And some of that rule review will be easy for me to say, rule review will be in your purview, and some of it will be on the department side of things, and we just don't know how that's going to shake out yet, but we'll keep you posted and bring those forward as needed. But again, there may be some department rule changes that would occur for the 22 float season, and then anything we bring to you because of the timeline it takes to go through the rulemaking process would be for the 23 season implementation. So. Other things happening in the planning world, we're re-engaging on Fish Creek. And for those of you who know the storied history there, we've had the property for over a decade and have had some false starts with recreational planning at the state park within the state park boundary there. Before we're re-engaging on that, revisioning what we're doing. And part of it is that we're not just looking in the state park boundary, we are approaching the Fish Creek site because we also there have 2 fishing access sites and a wildlife management area, plus the Alberton Gorge Recreation Area is right nearby. So we are taking this approach as sort of the region's calling it a watershed approach. That is not quite entirely true because we're not actively engaging with the Forest Service that surrounds us, but it is for the properties that we own a watershed approach and a whole different way of looking at recreation management in fish, wildlife, and parks. And it really speaks to the division that the director is taking the agency in now, that holistic approach, region by region. Ideally, someday in the future, we get to a region-wide recreation plan. But for now, we're going to be focusing on, as it makes sense, these groupings of sites and managing their recreation. And Fish Creek is going to be putting our toe into the water of that. We are working on the scope of work to hire a contractor to help us with that. It's going to be a big lift, lots of public engagement expected. One of the first things we did was go to the Mineral County Commissioners in November and meet with them, letting them know that we're headed in this direction. And we talked about the reorganization of the agency and the director's vision for this. You know, it's the same mission of the agency, it's just a different approach. And we want to move on this. We are motivated to move on Fish Creek planning, particularly in advance of the 23 session. Our expectation is we're going to take this planning process, have it wrapped up by August next year, and know what our infrastructure asks are going to be to take it to the 23 session and say, this is what we want to do at Fish Creek. This is what we need to get there. It might also be a phased approach like Headwaters, but we fully expect this to be part of our package that we take to the 23 session. So we said to the commissioners, we're motivated to move, but we want to move with you, not against you. And, you know, they were receptive to where we're headed. One of their primary questions was, are you actually going to do something this time? And again, we're motivated to move, but we need to do it thoughtfully. We want to do it well. We'll be looking and reviewing at the past planning work that's been done, building on that though, and taking it in a new direction as we look at all of our properties within that area. And so that's pretty exciting for everybody. We've had a great conversations between headquarters staff and the regional staff. My hat's off to Regional Supervisor Randy Arnold and his wildlife and fish folks who are joining us on that. The other piece of this is that we're partnering with DNRC, the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. They have some in-holdings there within our sites. Some of them are cabin site spots. Others are just trust land property on which a lot of dispersed camping is occurring. In fact, much of the recreation within the Fish Creek watershed is on the DNRC parcels. And so working with them, because managing the recreation is not their first mission, and how we can help them and work with them on that to do a better job, because we have concerns about the resources being impacted, much like on the Smith River, where you have a boatload of humanity, literally boatload coming on and you know, having an impact on vegetation and campsites and whatnot. Very similar concerns at Fish Creek along the creek there. And so how can we manage those recreational impacts better to protect the resource? Because again, the whole point that Quentin Kujala has made about how we move forward in this new way as we're looking for the best balance in the country between protecting the resource, conserving the habitat, conserving the wildlife, the cultural resources, whatever they are, and provide an opportunity and good opportunity for the users. And so those are the things we have in mind as we work through the Fish Creek and the Smith and the other processes. A couple other things going on. We are undertaking a holistic agency-wide signage planning effort for wayfinding signs. And Chair Kip, this is right in the alley of your new sign for Bannock. We're going to be looking at hiring a contractor to help us determine a plan for not only consistent format, consistent design, what do the signs look like coming off the highway and when you get into the site, and how do the signs help you understand what you're supposed to be doing there, what the site's purpose is, because different recreation sites have different, a state park's purpose, for instance, is different than a wildlife management area. And so doing better with our signage to help our users understand what the location is for, why it was acquired, and how they can help us be good stewards. One focus, Amy Glasscock is our lead on signs in the Design and Construction Bureau that she has as she thinks about this. And she's been doing this work and putting this together for the park side of things for the last 2 years. And now that we're in this reorganization, we need to look at it holistically, looking at all of our site types. So we're taking a moment to do that. But Amy says you walk into a site and the first thing you see is don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And that's the message you get. And so as we think about doing this holistic look at our signage is, hey, welcome. Here's where you are. This is what this site is for. This is what it does. And hey, while you're here, would you help us be a good steward by following these rules? And so we're going to be incorporating that sort of perspective on it as we move forward. I had an opportunity when I went out to Eastern Montana with the director and deputy in early November, I think it was. I went over to Intake Fishing Access Site and Stipik Fishing Access Site, and that was a great dichotomy of the types of signs we have. At Stipik, you pull up into the entrance and it says, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And you go to Intake, and there's this really nice welcoming sign that says, welcome to Intake. It's old, it's peeling, but it was a nice welcome to Intake. This was a partnership between the county and the agency, and I forget the federal agency that I think was also involved, but it's just an entirely different approach. And so we'd like to take that more welcoming approach with all of our sites. A couple other more specific updates, the trail grant programs. We have 3 grant programs that are opening next week on December 15th. The Montana Trail Stewardship Grant Program, the OHV Grant Program, and the Motorized Summer Trail Pass Program, all open on December 15th. The Recreation Trail Grant Program, Recreational Trails Program grants, opens January 18. That's the federal RTP cycle. Some people are more familiar with just saying RTP, but things are moving there. We've had some heavy lifts we've had to do with changing in our online platform for the grant applications that delayed the opening of those cycles. Typically they open in November, and we had to push back because of those technical issues with the online platform. But we're working through those. Big hats off to staff. Carissa Beckwith, Seth MacArthur, Samantha Kemp, who have gritted their teeth on more than one occasion and figured out how to make this work and move it forward. And we are so appreciative of that effort. Those grants will close the application cycles in early spring, and we'll go through our usual review process with the advisory committees. Those committee nominations are on the director's desk now for consideration, and then moving forward to the governor's office. So we'll make those announcements before early spring on what those committee memberships look like. We had the AmeriCorps close of service ceremony in November. Awesome job by Seth Steyer, who's the AmeriCorps lead for us, the Montana State Park AmeriCorps program. We had 20 AmeriCorps members around the state this year, and both Beth Shoemate and I were here for the close of service, and they did awesome presentations about the work they've been doing, talking about their mission and the specific projects they worked on. You brought up Makoshika today and all the cool stuff that's happening there. They had Makochella, which was a new music festival that they brought in, and just because it was in their spirit, these two AmeriCorps members that were located out there. They had this idea and they worked hard to bring it to fruition. And it sounds like it was a really great event. And so different things like that happening across the state. The caverns, Lewis and Clark Caverns, their AmeriCorps member initiated an escape room at the cabin there, you know, and that's the escape rooms are a cool new recreation thing people are doing across the country. And she brought it to Lewis and Clark Caverns, and Rhea Armstrong, the park manager, was like, I'm not sure we can ever not do that again because it was such a big hit with the community. So, you know, they're bringing these new ideas and vitality, and we really appreciate that. So my hat's off to all of them. They were just wonderful people. I enjoyed those presentations. I didn't get to work with them through the course of the year, but their spirit as we stood in this room for their close of service was very evident. And I encouraged them to consider thinking about, and many of them said, this AmeriCorps experience put me on the path for the rest of my life. I want to get into environmental education. I want to get into parks management, whatever their specific path was, because often they're very young folks just coming out of college or whatever it is, and not everyone, but you know, they really spoke to how AmeriCorps set them on that path and their experience here. And my hat's off to all the park supervisors who help make that such a good experience for them, because they do a lot of work with these folks and coaching them and giving them opportunities and letting them run with things and coming up with ideas and not saying no, saying, okay, here, let's go. And how do we get it done? And working with them on their great ideas. So we're looking forward to a great season next year. We do have an opportunity with the Governor's Office of Community Service to expand Fish, Wildlife, and Parks AmeriCorps program with a few more members outside of parks, fishing access sites, wildlife management areas, AIS, and boating recreation sites. We're working with them to sort out what those position descriptions might be for those AmeriCorps members, but they'd be roughly with us, I believe it's April to November next year. We're sorting out the details. But it's an exciting opportunity and something that I had hoped to do maybe in 2023. And then Sarah Sadowski with the Governor's Office Community Service came over and said, hey, we got an opportunity to do it next year. You want to do it? And so Seshtar was like, okay, let's give it a shot. And we're putting it together. We're still working through all of the details, but it's exciting. And because they really bring so much energy to all kinds of work that we do. And last, I want to give a specific recognition to everyone involved with the honoring of Chief Plenty-Coup and the history of his presence at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Washington, D.C. This was the first, it was the 100th anniversary this year, and the Crow Honor Guard went out to Washington, D.C. along with members of the State Parks Foundation. Pat Doyle from our staff went and really marked this momentous occasion. It was the first time civilians had been allowed to walk in that area, and they were the first to lay wreaths on the tomb. And it was remarkable, and a lot of work went into making that happen. And I want to specifically thank the park staff that helped with that, and also recognize partners like the Parks Foundation that also made that happen. It was a really special event. A lot of video and photos were taken, and the hope is that there will be development of interpretive items in the future that we can use these. There might be some sort of documentary that comes out as well, but so that we can take that information that was collected in that wonderful experience and put it into something at the park that can really benefit users in the years to come in understanding the role of Chief Plenty-Coup and the importance of him in our history. So with that, those were the things I wanted to highlight, but I'm happy to field any other questions or anything you might be curious about to the best. And I know that I might have to say, we'll get back to you on that.
Okay, any discussion from the board about Hope's presentation?
This is asking you to repeat something at Hope, and I apologize, but
well, hopefully I'm able to do that.
Well, no, just the positions, the three bureau chief positions. The one was stewardship. What were the other two?
So it's the Stewardship Bureau, and then the Visitor Services Bureau, and the Access and Landowner Relations Bureau. And if you want to go into more detail about what I see in each of those.
Needed a base.
And I think, sort of the target for the Stewardship Bureau Chief, so that position is out now with the holidays and whatnot. We don't expect probably to have a hiring in place until someone starting maybe early, mid-February. Okay. And then the other two bureau chiefs will be a few weeks behind that. Okay. So it's there's a lot of process I'm learning and getting all this done.
I'm sure there
I'm
is.
getting a big education and a lot of respect for all the state employees out there on the executive side.
Anyone else?
I would just say, hope you do an outstanding job. Thank you for your good
Thanks.
work.
Well, thank you. And it is a team effort. I am standing on the shoulders of the information that others have provided to me and the work that they have done. So they really deserve the recognition.
So Vice Chair Mo, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Hope I have a couple of things. Maybe it's just me, but in some future meeting, it would be helpful to have a little more detail on Fish Creek, the past, present, and future. I'm feeling like there's some context there that I'm not aware of. And so I'd like to hear a little bit more about that as a separate item informationally sometime. The second thing that there were two ideas that we had talked about prior to your getting here that I don't want to get lost, and your mention of signage brought them up. And one is I'd like to see maybe identify a particular park to try this with, but we had talked about using the various tribal names for a particular park. And I sort of envision that as those street signs where you have all these different names on them going down. I think that would add to the context behind some of these parks. And it would be a good recognition of the long history of that particular area. If there's one park that's suitable for that, Rachel would probably know, but I think it just adds something to the experience. And the third thing is that I think it was Conrad Burns, who was a senator some 20 odd years ago, who said that Montana is a place that has a lot of dirt between light bulbs. And I have had that reflection on that as I visited the state parks. And it would be nice as you're getting ready to visit a state park, or you're driving over to Hell Creek, for example, or you're driving over to Makoshika, to be able to pop in a podcast or something that would tell you about the geology of the area, the cultural background of that particular area, things that you might want to see, related history. And if there are federal funds that are available right now to help with tourism and COVID-related things that I think we saw a lot of during the pandemic, that might give you some access to funds to do that. But even if we started that with one particular area, and I think Eastern Montana is very well suited to it, I think that would really enrich the experience, so that when you actually get to the park, you've already got kind of this background and you're actually looking for the things that they've talked about.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Vice Chair Mo agreed on all fronts. We'll absolutely bring you more details on Fish Creek so you can get a better, more comprehensive picture there, past, present, and future. Regarding the signs and the place names, the tribal names, that is absolutely actually something that we've sort of put a marker on for Headwaters as being our
would be a good one
of doing that. First Peoples also easily comes to mind, Chief Plenty-Coup. There are lots of ripe opportunities, and that is a focus that we're including in our scope of work for the contractor for the sign effort. But to speak to Headwaters particularly, you talked about a street sign, and I have been thinking about a circle because of the circle the importance of the circle in tribal cultures, where maybe at the entrance of Headwaters, as you're coming right in, that you have, who knows exactly what it looks like, but a circle of the different place names with other interpretation and education materials around to help inform that. But Quinn Kuka, our tribal liaison, has also been working on place name signs for Madison Buffalo Jump. place name signs might be the wrong way to say that, I'm sorry. It's a flip book to provide more educational context for the use of the site by tribal nations. And so Quinn is one of our key people for helping develop this. As we look through the system, we are absolutely looking for those kinds of opportunities. And then lastly, when you mention those like an interpretive or educational podcast that you can plug in, that is also something that we've also been talking about.
Oh,
so
good.
It's neat to hear you sort of reinforce that idea. We do see that as a good opportunity as well.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that I remember first trip through Headwaters with the audio tour drive, and I'm like, oh, it kind of helped me. You know, it was helpful, and maybe that could be a podcast linked off of the website for the particular something like that. Yeah. That's easier said than done, but sure.
It is, but I think, you know, in this day and age with technology, Mr. Chair and Board Member Loomis, I think we can get there. We have to do it thoughtfully and well, and you know, maybe some AmeriCorps get involved. You know, we'll have to think through planning how we would approach it, but choosing the really ripe spots as our starting points and building out from there. Yeah.
Just as a suggestion, Hope, too, I was involved in a museum down in Cody when they were building the Native American wing and how to engage. And what the fellow did who put the money up to build the wing did was he engaged all of the tribes, the 34 northern tribes, and had them sit down, and they just said, no, museums don't tell our story. But rather than a brick wall, this was, to me, was really good. They said, then tell their stories are passed down orally. Then tell your stories orally. We want your tribal council members to tell the stories. And that created podcasts for the museum. That was wonderful. And the tribes updated those stories every year and bring their own people through. I thought, instead of brick walls, that was a really good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
One of the places that I think of that would be really enriched by that kind of thing, and I'm going to get the name of the park wrong. It's the one that's pretty close to Ekalaka. Is it Medicine Rock or?
Mm-hmm.
The geology is so interesting just on its own. And then there have to be lots of stories about the things that have happened there in the past. So that's just one example of when you go there, it's a pretty solitary experience. And yet you get this sense that you're in kind of an almost sacred place. And I think that would really be enriched by access to something to listen to on the way there, or even while you're there, that helps you to understand what it is that you're looking at.
That's another great example. So I think about at Summers Beach, we're working on getting the dynamic beach erosion control project going. And one of the things we need to do before we can do the work is have the cultural survey done. That's a requirement for us on state property. And so we're working on the contract with CSKT to have their cultural committee and workers come out, survey the site, but they're also going to go deeper as part of that contract and talk with their elders and research their oral histories for the site and take it to another level in that cultural survey, with the intention that we will have the opportunity to use that information as we develop interpretive and education materials for the site. So we're looking for those opportunities to bring that forward.
Thank you.
I guess that's everything then.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
I think that's all for you then. So the next item is just public comment on issues that were not on this agenda. So if there's anyone in the room that would like to comment, you need to name and where you're from and who you represent, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I apologize to Hope that I wasn't the right person when she tried to introduce me the first time. I'm actually Frank La Liberty. I'm a retired teacher from Cascade, and I spent numerous years on the State Trail Advisory Committee. And now I am on the board of the Montana Trails Coalition. So obviously trails are a main focus of mine, and I'm very concerned with the reorganization to see how the trails and the trails programs are going to be dealt with. So I appreciate being able to attend this afternoon. I have some other meetings that I have to go attend to. So, and good to see how this board works. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the room that would like public comment? Okay, then I guess we check to see if there's anybody on Zoom that wants to comment.
Mr. Chair, there is currently no hands raised.
Okay. So I have a comment and a question. We get some emails from Morgan Jacobson and maybe it's just me because I'm in Region 3, but I get some emails from him. And I also see him on TV. They have a section once a week. It's This Week in Fish Wildlife. And very informational, very good. I don't know if that happens in all the different regions around the state, or you have an informational officer that's on TV and getting this stuff out to the other regions, or are we just lucky? Because it's great to see him once a week. Anybody can help me there?
Chair Kip and other members of the board, I'll take a first stab. And there is certainly that specific example is not the only kind of outreach of that sort, but there is a difference across the regions as to how exactly that shows up. And then there's also some, I'd call them statewide efforts that come out of the, for want of a better way to put it, out of the, on the program end, out of the Helena office. And so I don't know what if that's the status update. I don't know if I'm hearing an appreciation, and also, do I hear correctly, Chair Kip, an expansion in the R3 efforts to include parks, not just fish and wildlife, and then also, as you articulate your appreciation for that sort of outreach, yeah, making sure that other regions do have similar, maybe not identical, but similar approaches to engaging the public on those topics. Hope, I don't know if you have anything to add.
I think I would just say, Mr. Chair, that there's really a variety of folks making those kinds of informational materials. That social media outreach is a really great way to get out into the public. Fish Friday is one. There's the Cray team for anyone who was an A team and Mr. T fan. They did the Cray team this summer out of the fisheries division. And then state parks, individual parks are putting out different items specific to their location. There's a statewide parks presence on Facebook as well. So I guess I couldn't speak for Greg Lemon, our administrator of the Communication and Education Division, on how coordinated that is necessarily, but there are a lot of different folks lending their hand. Some of the AmeriCorps members were doing it this summer at state parks too. So it's a really multi-pronged approach.
Okay. It's the TV's name is Fish and Wildlife this week, but Morgan speaks of the parks as well, because he spoke about Lewis and Clark Caverns and the Lantern Tour. And I just think it's great. I mean, I see it once a week, and there's really good information that goes out to the public in a very relaxed presentation, just 3-4 minutes.
What's his last name?
Morgan Jacobson.
Yes, Chair Kip, that is correct. And Morgan's position is the regional information officer. And so that person representing that capacity there is in other regions as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And to add to Hope's, it's everything from sites to circumstances to projects, to, the whole plethora of what's going on today.
Well, he did a great presentation on what happened at Hebkin on the Madison just recently. So that's all I've got. So that should conclude today's meeting. Our next board meeting is tentatively scheduled for March 3rd of 2022. So everyone have a great holiday. Hope, have you got something else?
I'll just give you a heads up. There could be something we look to convene you on via Zoom in January related to a land exchange at Lake Mary Ronan. We're waiting for some additional details from the surveyor, but we have a land exchange happening there. There's also at Lone Pine an acquisition that we're looking to finalize that might not be able to wait for that March meeting. So that's sort of the fluid nature of those meeting dates.
Right.
We would expect to absolutely have meetings on those dates, but there might be special circumstances. And again, we do like to have sort of a 2-month lead on those, but these are some special things that we need to jump on potentially if we can get them moved forward. So we might look to have a Zoom meeting with you briefly in January for those.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I guess we'll, someone want to move to adjourn the meeting?
I move that we adjourn the meeting and wish you all a happy holiday.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Guess I wrapped this.
Good job.